So, I want to talk about this rap battle between 50 Cent and Kanye West. Now, Kanye West and 50 Cent had releases of new albums. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was both their second album. And they had these releases planned for September 11th, both at the same time. And the media got to realizing that it was the same time, you know, and started talking to the artists and kind of asking, you know, was there a rivalry? Who did they think would sell more units on the first weekend and things like this? So some comments got exchanged, and it got a little bit heated, a little bit of friendly rivalry, the artist said. And 50 Cent wound up making the proclamation that if Kanye West outsold him, that he would retire. So, come to find out, the release date comes, September 11th, just passed, and sure enough, Kanye West outsells him, 700-something thousand album units to about 500,000 units. So, it remains to be seen if 50 Cent's going to be good to his word and retire from the rap industry. But that leads us directly to, of course, Don Imus. Don Imus. How does it lead to Don Imus? Well, let me tell you. You remember when Don Imus came out here a few months back? This is going on 6 months or more probably, and made these comments. Well, it had to be in March, I guess, because it was around the time of the NCAA basketball tournaments. So he came out and made these statements about the Rutgers women's basketball team, which was at that time playing for the national championship, and wound up losing, I guess, and was the runner-up. At that time, Imus went on his morning radio show talking about the team and had some pretty nasty things to say, including calling them a rough bunch and a bunch of nappy-headed hoes. At that time, all the racial activists, you know, sprung into action, calling for Mr. Imus's job. Al Sharpton chief among them, and eventually Mr. Imus was let go from his NBC radio contract and his CBS radio contract and his MSNBC television show. Mr. Sharpton and the other people like him during this time, you know, rightly so, I guess, pointed out that these types of comments were offensive and egregious, and they demanded, you know, that the public airways should not be used to promote this type of attitudes and things like this towards black women. Now, somehow Mr. Sharpton took these comments to be explicitly racist, even though there were 2 white members on the team, and Imus did not exclude them from his comments, but nevertheless, Mr. Sharpton immediately grabbed onto this as a racist issue. However, other groups and other media outlets pointed out to Mr. Sharpton that some of the worst perpetrators of this type of behavior, this type of language used towards women and black people, were black artists, black rap artists, and black R&B artists themselves, who often referred to women in a derogatory fashion and displayed women, portrayed women in a derogatory fashion in their videos. So Mr. Sharpton, responding to the pressure from these groups, also at that time said he would like to see the N-word, the B-word, references to women in this type of derogatory fashion removed from rap lyrics as well. So this leads us back to the battle between 50 Cent and Kanye West for album sales. This was a prominent thing in the media. Anybody could have known these albums were coming out and that they would have a big impact in the rap industry and on radio airplay and what have you. So I myself went into this, looked up some lyrics from these 2 prominent albums. Turns out that you don't have to search very far to find this type of derogatory, inflammatory language in these albums. 50 Cent has a cut on his album entitled 187, apparently in reference to the police code for homicide. In the first stanza of that song, he uses the N-word to refer to black males at least 10 times. Kanye West, up on a cursory examination of his song titles, you can go to one called Drunk Stupid Girls, where he bemoans dealing with all these drunk stupid girls, as he calls them. So it would seem to me there's some language that's at least as egregious, if not more so, than the language that Mr. Imus used. However, Mr. Sharpton has been totally silent on this issue. Where is Mr. Sharpton's outcry? This is my point. The fact is that Mr. Sharpton and those like him that jump to the forefront at every time there is a racial issue in our country between blacks and whites really care nothing about truly healing racism or racism itself against blacks. What they care about is jumping on situations where it's black versus white, racial tensions. A black man like 50 Cent using the N-word on other black men means nothing to Mr. Sharpton. Is it somehow less egregious because it comes from another black man? A black man degrading women, calling them drunk and stupid, is not important to Mr. Sharpton. I've heard no outcry in the media from Mr. Sharpton. I have heard no racial activists calling for these two gentlemen to be stripped of their recording contracts, to be let go by the record companies that they're currently employed by, or to be otherwise castigated for these types of remarks. It's simply fallen by the wayside, and it goes to show that Mr. Sharpton's words during the Don Imus scandal were simply to appear at the time to be equal in his castigation of this type of behavior, and it was something that was just politically expedient, but that Mr. Sharpton cared nothing about, really. Mr. Sharpton actually is a supporter of racial tensions many times. If you look at his record in times past, during the Crown Heights riots, he called Hasidic Jews diamond merchants at the funeral of a young black boy. He called a Jewish shopkeeper in a predominantly black neighborhood an interloper, and many other incidents where Mr. Sharpton, even recently in Jenna, he's been down there shouting "No justice, no peace," which means he and his followers intend to keep violence in the streets until they see justice served as they see fit. What we need is true leaders that will stand up and stand out against this type of behavior before it becomes political.